Okay, hello everybody. Just wanted to wait a second while everyone got their seats and climbed over each other, but I think you're all kind of settled. And to the people at the back, I assure you this won't go on for too long, so don't worry about standing. Yes, thank you so much for coming to see our presentation. My name is Amareet, Kaur, and I manage the high volume recruitment team at Transport for London, and this is my colleague Ross. I always say, I've spoken at a couple of these events before, and I always say that it's a bit dangerous when you give me the microphone, because I'm always tempted to start singing a bit of Britney, maybe a bit of Beyonce, but from the frightened look on your faces, I'm not going to do that, so don't worry, you're all good. So, in that case, we'll just crack on with the presentation. So how to deliver volume recruitment with a personal touch. So got a few cool little facts there. So Transport for London isn't just the underground, it isn't just the tube. Many of you would have used our network today to get here, whether it was cycling, whether it was getting the bus, or even the tube. So I thought, it's the end of the day now, you're all getting a bit tired. Some of you probably had a few of those cocktails on that free stand. So I thought, why don't we have a little icebreaker? So let's say top 3 busiest tube stations. Who wants to give it a guess? Be brave, go on. Bank, Central Victoria.
Oxford Circus. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So in the top 3, you've got Oxford Circus, naturally, because whether it's the weekday or the weekend, there are always people passing through. I think Victoria was one of them, wasn't it? King's Cross. And do you know what, I'm just going to say 4 because I'm not sure of the order. Waterloo as well, so you did quite well. All right, we're off to a good start. All good. You passed, so we're not going to kick you out. So Transport for London. So no other city is as recognised for its transport system than London. You see the iconic red bus or the black taxis and you just think of the transport in London. We're part of the Mayor's team. So when the Mayor sets his strategy, it's actually our job to implement the transport strategy. And we're really passionate about doing that. And one of the big objectives for the Mayor is actually that we want to reflect the city we serve. So as you're passing through our transport network, are you seeing a diverse range of people that reflect the people that actually live in London as well? And that's something we take really seriously through all of our recruitment processes.
Cool. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So just a bit of background to our team and how many people we recruit per year. So we get around 53,000 applications per year, recruiting just over 2,000 hires per year as well. So quite busy. Next. Cool. So we're going to talk through some challenges now. So as you're all aware, candidates are looking for a personal experience, so are hiring managers, whether it be recruitment processes as well. So there are lots of challenges that we have to overcome to make sure that we give everyone the best process possible and make it as seamless as possible. The first one being, as you're probably all aware, there's a lot of business pressure to recruit high volumes of talent at one time under significant time constraints. And that's something that we have to deal with a lot, and we have to make sure that we really, really manage our stakeholders to make sure that they are aware of what the process is and how it's going to run from our perspective. This brings us on to quality and quantity versus time. So lots of pressure to recruit lots of people, but we want to make sure that the right candidates that are coming through the door, and we want to make sure that we're not losing candidates through the recruitment process, whether it be at one stage of assessments or not. How do we protect the diversity strategies? This is something that we work very hard as an organisation and something we've made great strides with over the years. So that's something we really need to make sure that we look after when we do the process. And keeping talent engaged. So some people can be waiting up to 2 years to start with us for some of our operational roles, such as tube drivers, for example. And how do we keep those people engaged whilst they're waiting to start with us? And how do we measure the success of that as well? Cool, so we're going to start with quantity and quality versus time. So what we have at TfL is we have a campaign planning document. So this is a signed document which we agreed with the recruiter and also the hiring manager. And what this does is this lays out all of the timeframes, the advert, the assessment process. Everything is agreed and signed for. And how this affects the personal touch is that we want to make sure that we're going back to candidates when we say we're going back to them, and we're not keeping them waiting around, or they're not contacting us to say what's happening with the process. So that's all signed and delivered. Assessment processes. So don't underestimate the power of your advert. The advert is a good opportunity for you to attract talent, but also remember it's a good opportunity for candidates to deselect themselves for a role they might not think they're suitable for, and that's good, really important when doing high volume recruitment. Assessment tools. So are your assessment tools the right ones? Are they measuring the volume? Do they handle the volume appropriately? And are we make sure we're getting the right people through the door? And are you checking the quality of that as well?
Okay, so diversity and attraction. So actually, when you're thinking about personal touch for your candidates, it actually very much starts at the very beginning of your process when you are trying to attract the right talent for your organisation. Something at Transport for London that I noticed with the high volume was that we didn't actually struggle for numbers, but it was actually, are those the right type of candidates we were looking for? What was the dropout rate in terms of quality? What was the diversity DNA of the candidates that were applying for our jobs as well? So what we did is we said to ourselves, how can we make sure that we're making this role as accessible as possible to all walks of life? You know, we've got people who know us as a brand and think, oh yeah, I could probably work for Transport for London, but equally, we've got candidates who don't realise they've actually got transferable skills to come and work for us. So there's this myth that in order to be able to apply to be a train driver, you have to have a driver's licence. Driving a train and driving a car are two very different things, so actually you don't. And actually, it's a lot more to do with your capabilities as an individual. Are you a really alert person? Are you good at following information? Are you calm in certain situations? Rather than, do you have experience in a certain field? And we needed to get that message across to people who did not realise that. What better way than to actually profile the wonderful people that work for us? So this is a nice little example where we took photos of people that work for us, and we actually shared their story and asked them to tell their story about what background did they come from before and what's it actually like working for us. And it actually does create that real personal touch for candidates, because they can actually then relate to these individuals and say, oh, actually, you know, this person's a mum, but she's also a tube driver. How does she manage that with her schedule? How does she manage doing shift work with childcare? And getting people to relate to those stories, we found actually made such a huge difference. Build relationships and make use of your own resources, including teams and departments. I'm not going to shy away from it. We don't really have much money. I think that's a given. So we have to be very creative and innovative about how we go about attracting candidates and getting the word out there. So we speak to people that work for TfL, certain departments. Maybe it's our communications department. Maybe it's our marketing department, and see if we can pull on their resources to put together some of the wonderful creative work that we've created. Make your role as accessible as possible. Don't take for granted people know your brand. I mentioned earlier, we get huge volumes of people applying. You know, they see a really good salary for one of our roles and they just go for it without really understanding the role. I think, Ross, you touched upon it earlier. If you've got people who are not right for the role going through your process, they're not going to have a good experience. They're going to find it frustrating when they don't pass the assessments, and it's going to feel quite negative, and they'll feel defeated afterwards. So it's always making sure that you're very clear about what the role is, but you're also getting the word out there as well. So I'm just going to take you through a couple of attraction images that we've created, which have really made a difference in kind of the diversity of the applicants and actually the diversity of hires that we've brought through the process. So on the right there was a video that we created for our Dial-A-Ride campaign. So you might not have heard of Dial-A-Ride, but actually it's a really cool service that TfL offer to either the elderly or people that have mobility issues, where it's a free service where they can book in and a little bus will come along, pick them up and take them to whichever destination they need to get to. So, you know, for some elderly people, it's just taking them to get their shopping from Sainsbury's. And it's a really nice service. And when we were recruiting for the drivers, we thought, actually, not many people know about this service. So we put together a video, and it really kind of highlights the difference it makes to people's lives. And we just thought that was it made a difference, didn't it, in people applying for the job. This was a publication we put together for a role that we have called compliance officers. So they stop and make sure that taxi drivers are compliant with our rules and regulations and the law. As you can imagine, you're on your feet a lot, and sometimes it's night shift work. So it's really challenging actually attracting females into this position. And we wanted to kind of demystify the role a little bit, and that's why we actually did a recruitment drive and interviewed some of our new compliance officers to find out what they thought about the role, and then push that publication out to people that were currently thinking about engaging in our process or keeping our waitlist warm. This was some of our Facebook and Twitter posts. So this one here was for a night tube train driver. So it's Friday, all of Friday night and all of Saturday night. And actually what we're trying to say is that, you can be a part-time night tube driver, but you can also have a part-time job elsewhere, and you can manage both. So, you know, we've got the lovely Liz here. She's actually a part-time travel agent, but then part-time she's a night tube driver. And we wanted to really showcase that in our imagery here by showing her in her kind of day-to-day life and then in her uniform as well.
Cool. So Amareet just touched on how we need to make these roles, need to make people aware of these roles and how they can apply for them. So one thing that we've done a lot of over the last couple of years is host open days for our recruitment campaigns. We tried to stick away from the recruitment open day title because we don't want people to be put off and think they can't come and chat to us and they come to a stall and we talk to them. It's more they come, they can listen, they can sit at the back, they can listen to a Q&A with our current staff members, and we'll have people who have been with us not so long and people that have been with us for a long period of time. And that gives people more of an awareness of the role, and it allows them to answer questions or ask questions that they might not know the answer to. So what we'll do with that is we normally give them some written information to take away with them always, and we always promise them that we'll send them the application link afterwards as well. So that gives it more of a personal touch and makes it less feel like we're the recruiter behind the process. They can actually come and meet with us and really get a feel for the culture of Transport for London as well.
I think there's always, you know, you've always got some people who are too scared to ask a question, or they've got ones that they think are really silly, but in the end might put them off from the process. But actually at the end, they feel comfortable enough to just come up and ask those questions with us one-on-one, which we might then find actually helps with the conversion rates as well with candidates.
Yeah. Cool, and moving on from that, so we do those for both external and internal campaigns. But one thing we're really committed to at the moment is making sure that if we do have an internal campaign, we really get the word out and we get the message out. As many channels we can do that. We can do it through internal email, through our intranet system where people can access that when they log on to their PC. We also create SharePoint sites now as well for each campaign, and that basically is a hub for people to go onto and find out all the information they need for the campaign. It can have all of the timelines on there, an outline of the assessment process, some profiles and videos that we might have created as well. And what that saves as a recruiters, you don't want people calling us all the time, asking us questions they should already know the answer to. So they can go on this website or the SharePoint site and really find out information without having to give us a call and ask us something that they should know already, which is good.
And I think also what really helps candidates, because again, when you're going through a high volume process, it can seem really intimidating and a little bit scary. There's all these stages you need to go through. So what we actually do is we outline the process from beginning to end on this website, or even during the information session, break it down step by step, and we actually offer them some hints and tips as well, because it's in our best interest that these candidates do convert for us.
Cool. So assessing talent, the personal touch. So we did touch on this earlier. So as you can imagine, we have a lot of people that do reapply for our roles. Our roles are really unique, and we do have a lot of people that want to become tube drivers, for example. So we have to use a wide variety of assessments for our recruitment campaigns. One thing we have looked into is tailored online assessments. So for one of our internal campaigns, we did actually create a customised situational judgment test for one of our roles. And we put months and months of work into that, and it did actually work really, really well, and we got some really, really good hires out of it. And then the next argument we have is competency-based interviews versus scenario-based interviews or role play. So scenario-based interviews are something that TfL have rolled out across the board, so not just in high-volume recruitment. And we think that for our customer-facing roles, this is definitely the best way to assess talent. So instead of people having a competency-based interview and giving us structured answers, which you've heard these answers before and again and again and again, we can put them in a scenario and really make them think about how they would approach that situation or a problem, and something they might actually encounter when they're on the station or they're at a ticket machine and there's an issue. They'll be able to really give us an opinion on what they would do in that situation. So that's something else we do. And also the last point, so have you got a variety of managers that will help you with your interviews? So a lot of our roles are operational, so our operational managers are out and about doing their job, so they don't have time to really do the interviews for us. So we've made sure that we've really got buy-in from the business. We've given them the training, we've provided workshops for them on how to interview people and how to interview the TfL way, most importantly. And this has helped us to really get the best talent in, because these people are going to be managing the talent that's coming through the door. So we need their opinion. They need to be making the decisions on who's coming in. So that's something that we're quite proud of as well.
And I think it certainly helps having actually the managers who are going to be managing these people when, you know, during the interview process, they can answer any questions for them around kind of the role itself and the realities of the role, and then seeing a familiar face once they do get through the door as well.
Cool. Candidate experience. This is probably one of the most important slides of the presentation. So it's obviously very important to outline the process from the outset. Going back to my earlier slide, when you are putting your advert and your job application form together, is it worth you putting a pre-screening question on there saying, have you read the advert and the documents in full? And that way they can't come back to us later on in the process and say, well, you didn't tell us this, but you ticked a box to say you read it. Make it clear, and that you can create. We've got a candidate charter at Transport for London which outlines what we expect of candidates that are applying for our roles, because we expect them to give us something in return for us, obviously giving them a good process. Conduct mystery shops on your processes and get feedback along the way as well. So what we do is we send out candidate surveys prior to our offers to get their perspective on how the process has been for them so far, and that really does help us to improve across the board. And talent pool and waitlist candidates. So as I said earlier, you can be waiting up to 2 years. Ways we keep them engaged is we send them information of exciting things that's happening. We normally contact them every couple of months at the minimum. And obviously as well, if they do have a start date that's in the near future and the onboarding process has been completed, we do sometimes invite them in for coffee mornings and shadowing days. So if you can imagine you're going to show up at a train depot in 6 weeks' time, you're going to be nervous. You've never travelled there before. So this is a good opportunity for them to come in, meet the team, meet the managers, get a feel for the culture and make sure that the first day is not as intimidating as it could be.
I think I saw a lot of shocked faces when we said we have, sometimes people could be on wait lists for 2 years. Sometimes, though, it can be as quick as 6 months. We have to be operationally ready. So, for example, if, heaven forbid, 20 train drivers suddenly quit, the tubes won't run for you and you won't be able to get to work. So we have to make sure that actually we've got people who've been through the assessment process and they are just ready to start as soon as we need them. And that's why that engagement piece is so important, because we could lose out on those candidates. They could then move on and go elsewhere. And as you said, the engagement work is absolutely key. And it's not just sending boring newsletters, it's keeping it relevant for them, keeping them engaged with the brand. Okay, so measure and review. So when you are kind of speaking to your hiring manager, agree an upfront way to track and report. Each of your hiring managers is going to be very different personality-wise. Some people like very nice, showy presentations and icons. Some people just want the data to have a look at themselves. But it's also important that you're tracking the data from the minute you go live, because you could be 1 week into your campaign and you might notice certain trends, not always positive, where you can actually jump in and then actually intervene and do something about it. So, for example, in the very early days of when I took over high volume recruitment, the female application rate was very, very poor. So I had a look at the attraction strategy that was in play. I went in, I amended it and changed it, and we saw a huge difference over a week period of applications. Also keep an eye on the assessment centre flow. Look at the numbers. You are going to have dropouts. It's just natural. That's what happens. But it's actually knowing what your general dropout rate is so that you can plan the numbers, because at the end of the day, if you know you need to make 500 hires, you need to make sure that X amount of people are getting through at this stage, X amount of people are getting through at this stage. So you've just got to track those numbers and make sure that you have got the right flow of candidates going through your process as well. Live feedback. So Ross talked about the surveys that we send out. It's actually really important that you do that, especially before they get their results, because it kind of gives you a true reflection on how they felt the day went. We do it anonymously and we do it after they've completed their assessments. Always conduct a wash-up. It is invaluable, because once you go back through, there'll always be lessons learned that you can take, and then most importantly, feed into your next campaign. I think, there's probably a bit of a habit where we're like, yeah, we're going to do a wash-up, and then you just don't really get round to it. But actually, you find a lot of things. Get feedback from any of your hiring managers or business managers that are involved in the process, as well as the candidates. And you'll often find there's little things that you can sort of tweak for the next time that you run it, including the candidate feedback. So, key achievements. So I know we've been talking at you for the last, 15, 20 minutes, but we actually did get some good results, so we thought we might as well just tell you so that you know we're legit. So we fill all of our roles and 100% directly, so we don't use any agencies at all. We have a very high training probation pass rate. So it's 99.9%, because it's all very well, we're doing this fantastic work of getting people through the door, but we don't then just sort of run away and go, oh, they're yours now. We actually want to make sure that they're passing the training that they go through. Some people go through up to 12 weeks of training, have to take certain assessments at the end of it as well. So this is actually really reassuring to see that we're bringing the right people through. We've been improving our D&I representation with each campaign we run. We're super proud of this because diversity is really high on the mayor's agenda, but also it's really important for us. We have the opportunity to make a huge impact on Transport for London and the people that work for us, just purely based on the number of hires we make. And, you know, we do some really cool attraction work. So for our compliance officer, the one I mentioned earlier, where you're outside on your feet quite a lot, 41% females. So it's up from the previous campaign of 9.4%. But actually, 3 years ago, it was running at 20% females. So it's a huge increase we've made over the last 3 years. Dial-a-Ride, 32% females. And this was quite a challenging campaign because actually people applying had to have a specific type of driving licence in order to apply. So our pool was already limited. And the BAME hires was fantastic. It was over 60%. Customer service assistant, so those friendly people you see when you tap your Oyster card at the tube station. 40.2% female hires and 69.2% BAME hires. And then customer service supervisor. So this is a bit of a promotional role for those who are in the CSA role. 45.5% females, 72% BAME. And the reason why this campaign was quite important to us is that, yes, we could be bringing people into some are entry-level roles, but then when it comes to the campaigns that are promotional, are we still pushing that progress through the company? Are we making sure that the females and BAME population are still getting those opportunities to progress and become supervisors and managers as well? So the work doesn't just stop there for us. Thank you so much for your time. I'm still not going to break into song, don't worry. But do any of you have any questions? Don't be shy. Yeah, go on. No, because our candidates are very vocal individuals, and they will tell us whether they like it or not, regardless, actually. I think that's something we're quite fortunate with. And there have been times, for example, when a candidate then finds out they didn't get the job, that they'll then complain, and then we'll pull out their survey and have a look at what they said about the survey at the time, and that can either reflect it or not. So, but that's why we make it anonymous. Because, you know, there is the point that, oh, well, you're going to know who I am and this might affect my result. To be honest, when you've got, like, thousands of people going through your process, we really don't have time to cross-check your names. But it's a good point of referencing and saying, well, you did this anonymous, and actually, you know, we can't tell if it's you or not, so it's not skewed in that sense. So, yeah, they're very honest people. Anyone else? Yeah, of course, all the protected characteristics. Yeah, so one thing that we do is we really engage with all our staff network groups. So we actually have many staff network groups at Transport for London that cover a lot of the characteristics that we have. And so, for example, if we are about to go live with a big campaign, we actually engage with them first and get any feedback from them, sort of say to them, what could we put in this campaign that you think could actually appeal to those individuals? Or is there anything they might think is a blocker for them to apply for this role? Is it, so for example, if it's a train driver role and it could be that, oh, I have a disability, could that stop me from applying? Is there anything we could put up front in our campaign that could actually tackle that question for them to make them feel confident enough to apply? I think there was another question over here. Yeah. Yeah, sure. The attraction that we do, the attraction works. Yeah. So when I joined, as I mentioned, we didn't struggle for numbers at all. The numbers were really, really good, but the conversion rates weren't. And I actually did a bit of a deep dive into the data behind that, looking at the representation of all the sort of protected characteristics. And it wasn't a good representation of where we should be at. And so that's why I sort of said, well, I think we take for granted that we're TfL and people just know who we are and apply. But as I said, you can't, no matter what kind of brand you are, you cannot take that for granted. You have to make that role accessible to people of all walks of life and give them enough information to make that decision if they want to apply for that role or not. And secondly, the most important thing is let your employees tell their story and let it be genuine, because they come from all walks of life. So we can sit there and be creative and go, oh, what can we tell people? But ultimately, it's our employees who've come from such a different variety of backgrounds that say, well, I came from this background when I became a CSA, or I became a driver, or I became a manager. And that's how people can relate to them a bit better. And genuinely, it's those two things that I truly believe have kind of impacted. And then, as I mentioned, when they go through the assessment process, monitor how they get on. If they drop out assessment stage, why did they drop out? Just having a look at that, revising it. We never take our results for granted. We're always reviewing and going back and improving our kind of next campaign. So, for example, we're going to be going live in a few months for a train maintainer role. And we struggle for females there. And Rose in my team, she's just sat here at the front. Say hello, Rose. She's actually put together some really cool imagery. It was at the beginning of the slide, but I don't think I can go back. Do you know what? I'm going to go back as I talk. But she's put together some really cool imagery that we think is going to attract people from different backgrounds to actually try and apply for the role. Kind of spin it on its head. People think of train maintainers, they think a male, hard hat. Actually, no. You can come from different backgrounds and still apply for the role and do well in it.